Satellite images released in November 2024 show China built a military installation in Djibouti that's 3 times larger than the base they said they were building. The facility covers 150 acres instead of the 50 acres declared to the Djiboutian government. It includes missile silos, underground bunkers, and dock facilities capable of hosting aircraft carriers. The U.S. base in Djibouti is 2 miles away. China built this massive expansion in 18 months while claiming it was just upgrading a small logistics facility. This isn't the only base China is hiding. Satellite analysis reveals 7 major military installations that China expanded by 200 to 400% over the past 3 years, while reporting minimal construction to international observers. Here's what the images actually show and why China's military base expansion is happening faster than anyone in the Pentagon predicted. China opened their Djibouti base in 2017, calling it a logistics support facility for anti-piracy operations. The agreement with Djibouti specified 50 acres maximum with no weapons systems. Satellite images from October 2024 tell a different story. The base now covers 150 acres with permanent structures designed for long-term military operations, not temporary logistics support. Here's what the images actually show. A 9,000-foot pier capable of docking destroyers and aircraft carriers. Underground bunker systems with reinforced concrete 6 feet thick, weapons storage facilities with blast walls and security perimeters. Barracks housing for 2,000 personnel instead of the 400 originally planned. Radar installations pointed toward the Gulf of Aden and Red Sea shipping lanes. But here's the critical detail. Construction happened in phases designed to avoid triggering review from the Djiboutian government. Phase 1 was the agreed 50 acres. Phase 2 added worker housing that was actually barracks. Phase 3 added equipment storage that was actually weapons depots. Phase 4 added maintenance facilities that were actually underground command centers. Each phase was small enough to be approved as minor expansion. Combined, they tripled the base size and completely changed its military capabilities. By the time satellite analysis revealed the full scope, the construction was finished and operational. The U.S. military base Camp Lemonnier is 2 miles away. American personnel can see Chinese military aircraft taking off daily. What was supposed to be a small logistics facility is now China's first overseas naval base, capable of power projection across the Indian Ocean and East Africa. China has 7 artificial islands in the South China Sea. They claimed these were civilian outposts for search and rescue operations. Satellite images from 2021 to 2024 show military expansion that quadrupled their combat capabilities. Ferry Cross Reef went from 670 acres to 1,200 acres. The runway extended from 9,800 feet to 10500 feet, long enough for heavy bombers. Hangars designed for fighter aircraft appeared in 2022. Satellite imagery showed 24 permanent aircraft shelters with blast doors and reinforced construction. Subi Reef added an entire naval harbor. Images from January 2024 show a deepwater port capable of hosting guided missile destroyers. The harbor includes ammunition loading facilities, fuel storage tanks, and maintenance buildings. What China called a weather station in 2018 became a naval base supporting Blue Water Fleet operations by 2024. Mischief Reef's radar installations tripled. High-resolution imagery shows 4 separate radar arrays covering different frequencies. The coverage overlaps to eliminate blind spots. These aren't civilian navigation radars. They're military early warning systems designed to track aircraft and ships across 600 miles of the South China Sea. But here's what the Pentagon is most concerned about. Each island now has surface-to-air missile systems and anti-ship cruise missiles. The weapons aren't permanently installed. They're mobile launchers stored in underground facilities and deployed when needed. China can activate defensive capabilities across the entire South China Sea in 48 hours. The Philippines is 200 miles away. Vietnam is 250 miles away. Taiwan is 600 miles away. China built military installations that threaten all three while claiming the islands were civilian infrastructure. China built a military facility at Gwadar Port in Pakistan that Western media barely covers. The base sits at the nexus of the Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf shipping lanes. Satellite images show construction that began in 2016 and accelerated dramatically in 2022. The facility covers 180 acres. It includes a 9,000-foot runway, hardened aircraft shelters, underground fuel storage, and barracks for 1,500 personnel. Pakistan claims it's a commercial port with security personnel. The satellite images show military infrastructure designed for naval and air operations. But here's the strategic nightmare. Gwadar sits 400 miles from the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of global oil supply passes through. China now has military presence at both ends of the Indian Ocean. Djibouti on the western side, Gwadar on the northern side. Any conflict in the region puts Chinese forces in position to threaten shipping lanes that supply Europe and Asia. The base expansion happened during Pakistan's economic crisis. China provided loans for commercial port development. The commercial port required security infrastructure. Security infrastructure turned out to be a military base. By the time the scope became clear, Pakistan was too indebted to China to object. Cambodia officially has no foreign military bases on its territory. Satellite images from 2024 tell a different story. The Ream Naval Base on Cambodia's southern coast underwent massive expansion funded and built entirely by China. Images from March 2024 show complete demolition of U.S.-built facilities. Cambodia demolished buildings that American military built in the 2000s and replaced them with Chinese construction. The new facilities include a pier designed for aircraft carriers, fuel storage for naval vessels, and barracks built to Chinese military specifications. But here's what Cambodia won't admit. Chinese military personnel are permanently stationed at Ream. Commercial satellite imagery shows Chinese Navy ships docked at the base for months at a time. What Cambodia calls training exercises look identical to permanent stationing in satellite analysis. The base sits 150 miles from Vietnam's southern coast and 300 miles from the South China Sea. China now has forward operating position, threatening Vietnamese waters and potential access to the Gulf of Thailand. Cambodia denied Chinese military presence, despite satellite evidence showing Chinese warships docked at facilities that didn't exist 3 years ago. The expansion happened in 24 months, while international observers focused on the South China Sea. In 2022, the Solomon Islands signed a security agreement with China, allowing Chinese military ships to dock and Chinese forces to protect Chinese interests. The agreement was vague about what protection means. Satellite images from 2024 show China began construction on facilities that look permanent. Guadalcanal Island has new port facilities capable of hosting naval vessels. The construction happened between March and November 2024. What the Solomon Islands government called commercial infrastructure includes fuel storage tanks sized for military vessels and communications equipment consistent with naval operations. But here's why the Pentagon is alarmed. The Solomon Islands sits 1,200 miles from Australia and directly on shipping routes between the U.S. West Coast and Australia. Chinese military presence puts them in position to threaten communications and supply lines between the United States and its primary Pacific ally. Australia offered infrastructure development to compete with Chinese influence. The Solomon Islands accepted Chinese funding instead because China didn't attach governance conditions to their loans. Now, Australia has potential Chinese military base 1,200 miles from Brisbane. The base isn't fully operational yet. Construction continues. But satellite imagery shows the facilities being built are military capable regardless of what the commercial agreements claim. China funded construction of Kiak Pier Port in Myanmar as part of Belt and Road Initiative. The port was supposed to be commercial infrastructure connecting Chinese inland provinces to the Indian Ocean. Satellite images show military facilities that commercial ports don't need. The port includes underground fuel storage with security perimeters designed for military use. Commercial ports store fuel in above-ground tanks. Military facilities use underground storage to prevent strikes from destroying fuel supplies. Kiokpiu has underground storage. Communications infrastructure matches military installations, high-frequency radio towers, satellite uplinks, and hardened communications buildings appear in 2023 satellite imagery. Commercial ports don't need this level of communications security. But here's the strategic position. Kalpyu sits on Myanmar's western coast facing the Bay of Bengal. China now has potential military facilities in the Indian Ocean without leaving the protection of a friendly authoritarian government. India is 800 miles west. The Andaman Islands that India uses for naval operations are 300 miles away. Myanmar's military junta took power in 2021 and immediately deepened ties with China. The port expansion accelerated after the coup. What Myanmar calls economic development looks like military infrastructure and satellite analysis. China is building Bagamoyo Port in Tanzania as the largest port in East Africa. The official purpose is commercial shipping. Satellite images from 2024 show construction of facilities that commercial operations don't require. The port includes a 15,000-foot runway. No commercial port needs a runway that long. That's military bomber length. Tanzania claims it's for cargo aircraft. The runway construction includes hardened aircraft parking areas and blast walls consistent with military aviation. Deep water berths are sized for warships. The port design includes berths 400 meters long. Container ships don't need berths that long. Aircraft carriers do. The depth of the harbor was dredged to 25 meters. Commercial shipping needs 15 meters. Naval vessels need 25 meters. But here's the location advantage. Bagamoyo sits on Tanzania's coast, facing the Indian Ocean. Combined with Djibouti 1,500 miles north, China would have naval facilities covering East African waters. Any shipping traveling between Asia and Europe through the Suez Canal passes through waters where China has forward operating bases. Tanzania's government approved construction claiming economic benefits. The economic benefits require Chinese loans that Tanzania likely can't repay. The default terms include giving China control of port operations. This is the pattern China used in Sri Lanka, where debt defaults gave China a 99-year lease on Hambantota Port. The Pentagon tracks Chinese base expansion through satellite imagery and intelligence reporting. What the images show is a coordinated strategy to build military presence along shipping routes and potential conflict zones while maintaining plausible deniability about military purposes. Here's the pattern across all locations. China funds commercial infrastructure that includes military-capable facilities. The host country accepts Chinese financing because Western alternatives require governance reforms. China builds facilities that serve dual commercial and military purposes. Once construction is complete, Chinese military begin using facilities for operations while claiming they're civilian. But here's what makes this different from U.S. military basing. The United States has formal basing agreements with host nations. American military presence is explicit and governed by status of forces agreements. China uses commercial agreements and debt relationships to create military presence without formal agreements. This lets China avoid international scrutiny until facilities are operational. The U.S. has approximately 750 military bases in 80 countries. These were built over 70 years through formal alliance relationships. China built functional military facilities in 7 countries in less than 10 years through commercial agreements that hide military purposes. The strategic implication is clear. China is building global military presence faster than the U.S. built its Cold War basing network. The construction happens under cover of commercial development, which makes diplomatic opposition difficult. Countries that might reject Chinese military bases accept Chinese infrastructure loans that include facilities usable for military operations. China's official military budget is $230 billion per year. Pentagon analysts estimate actual military spending at $450 to $700 billion when including hidden programs. Base construction often doesn't appear in official budgets because it's funded through commercial state-owned enterprises. Here's why satellite imagery reveals what official statements hide. China can claim facilities are commercial. Satellite analysis shows whether infrastructure matches commercial or military specifications. Underground fuel storage, hardened communications buildings, reinforced hangars, and oversized runways don't serve commercial purposes. They're military infrastructure, regardless of what funding documents claim. But here's the limitation of satellite intelligence. Images show what's built. They don't show intent. A facility capable of hosting military operations might be used purely for commercial purposes until a crisis begins. China maintains plausible deniability until the moment they need military capability. Then dual-use facilities become military bases overnight. This strategy creates ambiguity that complicates U.S. military planning. The Pentagon must assume every dual-use facility could become a military base during conflict. This requires planning for Chinese military presence at locations where China claims no military exists. The Djibouti base proves the pattern works. China said they were building small logistics facility. They built full naval base. By the time satellite imagery revealed the deception, the base was operational and protected by Chinese security forces. Djibouti couldn't reverse the expansion without losing Chinese investment. China gained military base without formal basing agreement. Satellite imagery shows construction continuing at all 7 major facilities. The pattern suggests China will add capabilities incrementally while maintaining commercial cover stories. The most likely next phase is submarine facilities. Several bases have deep-water harbors, but no submarine piers yet. Submarine operations require specialized infrastructure, including underwater entrances and maintenance facilities. If that infrastructure appears in satellite imagery over the next 2 years, it indicates China is building true forward operating bases rather than just logistics facilities. Air defense systems will be next. Mobile air defense can be deployed quickly. Permanent air defense installations with hardened control centers indicate China expects to defend facilities against attack. If satellite images show construction of air defense bunkers and fire control radars, it means China is hardening bases for potential conflict. The expansion won't stop at current locations. China is negotiating port deals in Equatorial Guinea, on Africa's Atlantic coast, and Vanuatu in the South Pacific. Both locations would give China military presence in regions where they currently have no facilities. If construction begins at either location matching the pattern seen at Djibouti and Gwadar, it confirms China is building global military basing network using commercial agreements as cover. The satellite images don't just show what China built, they show what China is capable of building when they want military presence but can't negotiate formal basing agreements. The strategy works. 7 countries now host Chinese military infrastructure that didn't exist 5 years ago. None of those countries admitted to hosting Chinese military bases. The satellite images prove otherwise. Commercial port development that happens to include military-capable infrastructure is China's strategy for global military presence. The pattern is established. The only question is which country accepts Chinese infrastructure loans next, and what facilities China builds once construction begins.